Maker Sarah.
And I'm Dream Maker Luba.
And today we're going to talk about our most absolute favorite attraction ever to be on the face of this earth, the Haunted Mansion.
Love it.
I cannot say enough good things about it. You can locate the Haunted Mansion in the Magic Kingdom in Liberty Square. We also like to point out that it is a family-friendly attraction. It is a little bit eerie at the beginning and it may cause for a little bit of chills, but it also offers a lot of entertainment and a lot of excitement.
So with this ride, there's no height restriction and it is fully accessible queues, so you can get on the ride with no problems, but you do need to transfer onto the ride. Now, this is both mine and Sarah's favorite ride. So Sarah, why do you love the Haunted Mansion as much as you do?
I don't even know where to begin with the Haunted Mansion. I feel that one of the most amazing things about it is that it was way ahead of its time. When Walt envisioned what he wanted, it was just beyond what anybody ever expected. The fact that he had came up with all of this creativity to have like the ghost features and all these experiences and the music and the voices and the animatronics were just completely ahead of what anybody was thinking of at that time. So for me, it's just that whole experience of being envisioned and I can't even get into how much I love it and why I love it. It's just the most amazing ride ever made.
I know, you get like chills every time I can hear that music at the beginning and your ghost host starting to talk to you. It's like, oh.
Or in my area, I cry pretty much every time I get on that ride. I get so excited and so overwhelmed with emotion, like I get tears in my eyes. And then that's my excuse that I need to get off and go back on it again because I cried the first time. So I feel like
I missed
that
something.
entitles me to go again.
Yeah.
And it works every time, not gonna lie. So that might be my secret coming out towards my family. I apologize. Now you know why I make you guys go on it so many times. So that way, it's just that moment where I know that I am finally home.
Now, do any of your family members love it as much as you do? Or are you the only one?
No, I feel like I'm the only one. I mean, my daughter does enjoy it. The first time she went on it, she was about 2.5 and she absolutely loved it. Anson, it took him a little bit more to get accustomed to it. My husband's just kind of like, yeah, it's good, it's there. But I don't know, there's something wrong with that guy. I don't know what it is, but for me, it's just from the first time I ever went on it at the age of 8, I was just so entrapped by it and I just thought it was so amazing. So Luba, why don't you tell me why the Haunted Mansion is your favorite ride?
So ever since I've been a little girl, we've been going to Disney and the Haunted Mansion is my must-to ride every time we go. I don't know, there's something about that stretching room, everything, and the ghosts, and I don't know, I don't even know how to explain why it's my favorite ride.
It's so
just
hard.
is. It's been there. It's an original from like Disneyland. They pretty much almost replicated it in Disney World, and I don't know. I love it.
And that pretty much sums it up, I think, for everyone that is a fan of the Haunted Mansion. They just love it. There's no other reason why. They can't really get into details why they love it. It just makes them happy, and I feel that's what it does for myself and probably for you as well.
Yeah, and it's just that, even though there's like that eeriness in there when you're walking in there and on the ride, it's just by the end you're like dancing in your doom buggy because you just love the music in there.
So now we are going to slide it on over to Dream Maker and former cast member of the Haunted Mansion, my favorite celebrity in the whole entire world, Hillary.
So let's talk a little bit about the history of the Haunted Mansion. The Haunted Mansion that we know and love today actually came in a few different forms, and it started way before Disneyland and Walt Disney World actually existed. When Walt was trying to think of the ideas for Disneyland, he actually had the idea of having some type of haunted house within the park. And he had Harper Goff actually draw up a bit of a design that ended up having a main street with a road offshooting from Main Street that led to a dead end with a haunted house on the hill and a church graveyard. And this was the original, really the very first time that we see the idea of a haunted mansion within Disney. Now, that was not originally built within Disneyland. So when Walt was going to expand Disneyland out in California, that idea of the haunted house actually came back to him. And he tasked Imagineer Ken Anderson with bringing that to life. So Ken Anderson had a space in between Frontierland and Adventureland to build this mansion. This was going to be a whole new land that Walt was designing, and it became known as New Orleans Square. So Ken Anderson designed the mansion to replicate an antebellum style southern mansion to fit into the space. The original designs for it actually had some overgrown trees, the house was a little decaying, and Walt didn't like that. Walt wanted his park to be pristine, and even if something was going to be a little spooky and supposed to be haunted, he wanted the outside still to replicate what he had done in Disneyland. So it was set that no matter the attraction, the outside was going to look nice. So they had the exterior of the Haunted Mansion in Disneyland. They had that concept ready to go. It was going to be a Southern style mansion, but now what was going to go on the inside? That was really the tricky part. Ken Anderson came up with a few different themes and stories, and it said that the beginning of the ideas started with a sea captain, and that the original story had a murderous sea captain who was lost at sea and came back and murdered his wife in the Haunted Mansion, and they haunted the mansion ever since. Walt wasn't too sold on that idea, so he pitched some other ideas that involve things like having a house where a family goes missing, or having even the legend of Sleepy Hollow with the Headless Horseman in the mansion itself. So they still hadn't really set on a story for the Haunted Mansion yet, but two other Imagineers came in onto the project, and that was Rolly Crump and Yale Gracie, and they were tasked with creating the effects that would go into the attraction. And a lot of the effects that they came up with are ones that we still see in the Haunted Mansion today. So like the busts with the eyes that follow you, the use of Pepper's ghost effect, and having different things that move and pop out within the Haunted Mansion itself. It was those two that really created that. Now, in 1963, New Orleans Square actually opened to the patrons of Disneyland. However, the Haunted Mansion wasn't complete yet. They still didn't know what was going to be inside this mansion. So Walt Disney had another Imagineer, Marty Sklar, create a real estate sign for the Haunted Mansion. And on the real estate sign, it actually encouraged ghosts to purchase post-lifetime leases for the mansion and framed it as kind of a retirement home for ghosts. Now, at this point in 1963, everything with the Imagineers kind of got put on hold while Walt Disney took his team to focus on the 1964 World's Fair. So everything kind of got put on pause for about a year or so, and then after the World's Fair, they came back to the drawing boards and they started presenting Walt Disney with their new ideas. More ideas came forward, so Rolly Crump had the idea of having different odd figures and items within the Haunted Mansion, and Mark Davis actually had one of the original ideas of having a ghost host, so a being that would guide you through this attraction. Now, the attraction was going to be a walk-through attraction, not a ride-through, so a walk-through some type of haunted house. And he thought that having some type of ghost host with a silent butler figure to lead you around would be a good idea. Walt Disney actually liked the idea that Rolly Crump had with the Museum of Weird, he called it. So originally, at some point, the Haunted Mansion could have just been almost like a Ripley's Believe It or Not, or some type of museum of oddities within it. And that's something that I can't think of the Haunted Mansion having today. That was one of the original ideas. However, in 1966, Walt Disney passed away. And with his passing, a lot of projects got put on hold and people didn't really know what to do. And it was soon figured that with the Haunted Mansion, they really just needed to refocus everything and finally get this put to use. As at this point, it had been 3 years since the facade had been built and nothing was inside. So Mark Davis, Claude Coates, and Ex Atencio really came forward with the project, and they settled on having the ghost host, and they really still needed that story. Now, Mark Davis and Claude Coates had very conflicting views of how the Haunted Mansion should be. Mark Davis wanted it to be a funny, family-friendly attraction. Claude Coates thought it should be a little more scary and spooky. And they ended up meshing the two, with Ex Atencio being in charge of creating a script and story for the actual attraction. Now, when you start off with the attraction, the beginning is quite scary and spooky. You'll notice that there's really not many animatronics around you or figures. It's all about the backgrounds and your surroundings that creates that spooky atmosphere, and that's reminiscent of Claude Coates. Then once you get about halfway through the attraction, when Madame Leota appears and she calls and summons on the other spirits, you get the funny, happy version with ghosts blowing out candles on a birthday cake, dancing, having a tea party in the graveyard. And that's really the Mark Davis side of the story. And it's all pulled together with Ex Atencio's lyrics for Grim Grinning Ghosts. And the song is actually played throughout the entire attraction, just using different tones and musical instruments to reflect the mood. Now, if you look through the Haunted Mansion, you'll notice that there still really isn't a fluid story throughout. And what they ended up doing is going with Walt's original idea of having it be more of a retirement home for ghosts, where you walk through this mansion, which is just a ghost house and a house for happy haunts. And ghosts are just living their lives and you're watching them perform their daily activities. So the Haunted Mansion finally opened in Disneyland in California on August 9th, 1969. It is the 50th anniversary of that attraction today. At the same time they were building that attraction in Disneyland, they were making replica parts. So on October 1st, 1971, when Walt Disney World opened, the Haunted Mansion attraction in Disney World opened as well. It opened in Liberty Square, so it is a slightly different land with different theming. It's more colonial America. So the style of our Haunted Mansion in Walt Disney World is more Victorian Gothic style. It's also a little more sinister looking. It's a house on a hill with forced perspective. It looks like it's towering over you and you go under into the mansion. So while the interior and the general theme of the attraction is almost identical to the one in Disneyland, the exterior is a little different. You can find a Haunted Mansion attraction in almost every single Walt Disney World park throughout the world. There is an almost identical replica to the Walt Disney World Haunted Mansion in Tokyo Disneyland. It is placed in Fantasyland because the Imagineers determined that in Japanese culture, ghosts were a little more fable and fairy tale-like. In Hong Kong, you have a bit of a different version of the Haunted Mansion. It's called Mystic Manor. And Mystic Manor is because in the Chinese culture, ghosts are treated very differently than they are in Western or North American culture. They are seen as things to be respected, to be honored, and not necessarily something to be played with. So Disney Imagineers knew they had to create something different. They created this manor home that was home to a gentleman who's part of the SEA. And it's him and his monkey, and they own this manor filled with wonderful items from their travels around the world. And of course, when you enter, everything goes wrong and you are going through this mansion with different effects and seeing all the different artifacts throughout, and you're actually on a trackless boat. Then in Disneyland Paris, we have another version of the Haunted Mansion. It's actually called Phantom Manor, and it's located in Frontierland. Now, the story is very different compared to the story and version that Disneyland and Walt Disney World in Tokyo has. It actually is about a family that gets money from Thunder Mesa within Frontierland, and they build this beautiful manor home, but there's an earthquake and the parents die, leaving the daughter on her wedding day. And the story in the mansion actually revolves around the daughter, and the daughter as a bride throughout the attraction. And at the end, you get to see a fun little frontier scene. So it's very different than the other Haunted Mansion attractions that we know here in North America. Now, one place that we haven't seen a Haunted Mansion attraction just yet is in Shanghai. Because again, with the Chinese culture, we don't really know if we will get a Haunted Mansion type attraction. Maybe we'll get a Mystic Manor, but we don't really know that just yet. So that's kind of a pretty big overview of the history of the Haunted Mansion, but it started even before Disneyland was built, and it developed all the way through his legacies within the parks to what we know and love today with the Haunted Mansion. So I think that does it for me. We're gonna talk about some tips and tricks now for your next visit to the Haunted Mansion.